So Keisha, Mary, Julie, while we're waiting for people to kind of let us know, I was actually hoping that maybe we could each spend just a second and introduce ourselves to the group so they can hear faces and voices. We're about to break into other groups after Julie does a little instruction, so everyone might not have time with everyone. And I think it's good for everyone to kind of see those faces and voices. My name is Jeremy Shore. I know I look like I'm 11. It's worse without this. I was in public education for 16 years in 2 different districts before becoming a consultant, largely for the organization TIES that a lot of you are familiar with. And I've been working with TIES for about 4 years, primarily focused on computational thinking, computer science, and early childhood STEM. Keisha?
Hey everybody, I'm Keisha. I'm one of the newer members to TIES actually. I'm 10 years as an educator, started out actually in an alternative school, taught special education for a few years, and then moved into some leadership positions around classroom management, restorative practices, SEL, and getting schools on the same page in that regard. And I'm now at TIES doing a lot of the same things, making sure that our SEL, our equity, and all of that is intact in the fabrics of what we're doing. I will be leading the College and Career Readiness group, where we will focus a lot on bridging that remediation between college leaders and business leaders and what they are receiving with what teachers are looking to provide to their students, as well as exposure to the field. So helping you guys understand how to use LabXchange to show diversity, to show women, to show Latinos, African Americans in the field, and what we can do with it. So that will be what we focus on in my third group. So if you're with me and Jeremy, we will see you in a little bit.
Thank you, Keisha. So for those of you who are here in previous weeks, I do want to point out that group that we're calling College and Career Readiness, because I think we've sort of changed names and focuses that have evolved a little bit as we've met with people. But we've talked a little bit about how that's the group primarily made up of out-of-school time people in the past, and so forth. However, now that the focus of that group has become college and career readiness, if that ends up making more sense for the focus areas of your own work, it's okay to be in more than one group. It's okay to switch groups, all of those things. Just let us know in the chat, and Angie, who's here as well, is kind of keeping track of that. Mary?
Hi, my name is Mary Lou. I'm a high school educator for the last 10 years, but I'm here today representing LabXchange, where I'm a teacher in residence and I've been working for the last 3 years helping to develop the platform and create science content. If you're not familiar with LabXchange, if this is your first time here, it's an online science platform that allows you to both add your own content, but also remix the science content that exists to sort of create your own custom pathways for delivery and instruction.
Mary also has my favorite headphones because I think I had those in like 1986 because everything old is new again, and they are amazing. Julie?
Hi, Julie Hostfjord. I'm the Global Director for Learning, Design, and Services for TIES, and I was a classroom teacher in Nashville, Tennessee with Keisha for a little bit, for 15 years, and then went into district, this is school level administration and district level administration. So I've been working with TIES mostly in the K-12 space, doing school design. And Mary, I was just going to ask if you could, for those of you who are new or maybe haven't signed up for the LabXchange classes in this yet, Mary, would you put those are you able to put those class codes in the chat box? Great. Yeah, so Mary's going to put you can join the focus group on LabXchange. Well, you don't have to do it right this moment, but in LabXchange, you'll see that there are several courses. So one course is called STEM Pedagogy and Practices, and that's for this entire group, all of us. So everyone needs to make sure you join that one. And that's where you're going to find resources for the things that I'm leading, and also some resources if you're building courses. And then we have 3 classes as well for the focus group. So there's one on district level people, which is the group that I'm leading. There's one on the college and career that Keisha's leading, and there's one on direct service to teachers that Mary is going to be, direct service to students, which Mary is going to be leading. So you'll join 2 classes. Everyone will join the STEM pedagogy and practices, and then everyone needs to choose one of the other 3 to join. And again, you don't need to do that right this moment, but I'm going to be sharing a PowerPoint in a few minutes, and I wanted you to know that that PowerPoint is uploaded already into the STEM pedagogy and practices course, so you can follow along there if you want, or if you want to look back on it later.
Thank you, Julie. So I think that the thing to keep in mind, as Julie just mentioned, is that it's important to be in the core group that everyone's in, at least one of these other groups. They have fancy names, but the shorthand that we've been using kind of internally is that one of these groups is really targeted towards teachers who are working with students. One of these groups is really targeted towards folks who work at a district level and work with teachers, getting teachers ready. So kind of that train the trainer model. And that third group is career and college readiness. It's also still a little bit of a catch-all if neither of those other 2 definitions fit for you. If you don't work directly with students, you also don't work directly with teachers, this other group might be the best fit for you. But it's okay to jump around a little bit and find the community of practice that makes the most sense for you. What Julie's going to be talking with us about here in just a few minutes is inquiry. I'm sure most of you, those of you who are educators at least, are very familiar with the concept of inquiry, but some of our participants are not educators. And also we believe that it's really important that we have common definitions, common language, common understanding of these concepts, because sometimes things like inquiry or design principles and all of those things can be different depending on the organization that you're in. I'm sure that you're going to have a whole lot of questions. We are going to ask you to wait and save those questions for our small group breakouts so that we can have as much time in those breakouts as possible. If there are some really great questions that we think are applicable to everyone, we may ask you to ask them again when we reconvene at the very end. So without further ado, Julie, I'm really kind of excited to learn about our working definition together of inquiry and how we need to be thinking about inquiry when we're talking about virtual learning using a tool like LabXchange.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. So last week we talked about the importance of using design thinking while we're designing these courses for students on LabXchange. So using a design process. You can call it the engineering design process or just design process. And we looked at a few different models of design processes, and those examples are also uploaded into the LabXchange course on STEM pedagogy and practices. So you can look through. I have some video clips that I've put in there as well. So if you weren't here last time and want to review on that, that's all in there. So what is inquiry-based learning? Inquiry-based learning, it's an approach to learning that emphasizes the student's role in the learning process rather than teachers telling students what they need to know. Students are able to ask questions, explore materials, and it really is a student-focused type of learning. So when we think about inquiry-based learning, it's really on a continuum. It's not just one way of doing it. So if you think of the inquiry-based learning having 3 components, you have a question, you have a procedure, and you have results. There are 4 levels of inquiry. So the first level would be a demonstration, and this is where the teacher is asking the question, the teacher is doing the procedure, and the teacher is demonstrating the results. In structured inquiry, the teacher is also asking the questions and doing the procedure, but the learner is doing is creating those results. In guided inquiry, the teacher is asking the question, but the learner is creating the procedure and finding the results. And then open inquiry is where the student does all of it. The student is asking the question, creating the procedure, and creating the results. So I want to share a few examples of what this looks like. So there's an example of open inquiry, and you can Google this later. It's a really great TED Talk by a professor named Sugata Mitra. And he did an experiment, and this was many years ago, but he did it when the internet was still a little bit new. But it was an interesting experiment where he just put a computer, he did this in India, put a computer in a hole in a wall in a remote rural village that had, and then he gave it internet access. And students and kids and adults and anyone was allowed to just go to the computer and search, just do open internet searches. And so that is he found that the students really learned a lot from doing, just having that open, having access to information. And I just put this here as an example of a real extreme example of open inquiry, where it's just wide open. Students can do whatever they want. In a classroom, open inquiry might look like maybe you just have materials out, and students are able to ask their own questions and explore the materials and come up with their own experiments. That would be open inquiry in a classroom. And so guided inquiry is a little bit more structured. And there's a program called Start Soul that TIES is involved with. It's called Self-Organized Learning Environment. And if you go to startsoul.org, you can take a look at it. But it actually took what Sugata Mitra did with the hole-in-the-wall computer and open inquiry, and it's created a little bit more structure there so that teachers are able to ask, the teacher asks the questions, and then the students are doing research, and it's a structured way to for students to research and find answers to questions. And then an example of structured inquiry would be your traditional lab. So student is given a question to explore, they're given the procedure to follow, and then they record the results. So one thing that I always recommend when I'm working with schools is that it's really easy to flip the script here to go from a traditional lab that's structured inquiry and then to make it more guided inquiry. And one easy thing to do is that instead of giving the students the procedure, give the students the question and give them the materials. And then they have to design what the experiment based on the materials that they have and the question that's been asked. So that's structured inquiry. And then all of this starts with a really good question. So, and I'll just a caveat here, this is my own thinking about this, although, some of this is driven, by, what I've done, research. This is just my own thinking about how to organize questioning. So you have essential questions. And so essential questions are the big questions that we deal with. So they're open, they're timeless, there's no one right answer. And an example of this might be, how do inputs create change? So if you think about that question, how do inputs create change? It's really broad. It can refer to multiple subject areas. And so I like to use essential questions when I'm trying to connect concepts and ideas across multiple subject areas. I can see how this could create, how this would relate to a math class, for example, as well as to science, as well as to social studies. You can see how that one question can really transcend all of those areas. And then the driving question is more focused on content objectives. So if we're thinking about a science class, and again, thinking about this essential question, how do inputs create change? Well, what specifically are we thinking about in the science class? This is a question I helped teachers create for a unit recently, and it was, what is the relationship between how different materials react to light and heat? Okay, we're still talking about inputs creating change, but now we're getting a little more specific. And then the guiding questions are where we're breaking down the essential and driving question into more discrete topics. So we're talking about materials, we're talking about light, we're talking about heat. Now, what are we actually going to be doing? What are we exploring with this? And so the example is, how does the color of the material affect the amount of heat it absorbs? So now we're drilling down a little bit deeper. And then supporting questions support the students as they're exploring. So we know that we're going to have them have these materials, they're going to be having a source of light or heat. And so these are the questions that will help them answer this question about how the color of material affects the heat absorbed. So which colors absorb the most heat, which colors absorb the least heat. So when I work with schools and districts, I use this graphic to help organize all of this. So if you think about a unit of study, you have that big essential question, and sometimes it's an essential question, if you're doing multiple subject areas, and sometimes it's a driving question. And then you're breaking this down into the different types of questions. You start with an entry task. So we think about starting with the phenomenon, and then we have guiding questions and supporting questions related to exploring that first phenomenon that's going to get students excited and interested in what we're learning. Followed by, and then you can see that this also follows the engineering design process down below. So I have taken the pieces of a design process and transposed them onto this. So that when students are exploring, we're being very cognizant that they're also following the engineering design process as they're doing these tasks. And each task they do has that guiding question and supporting question. And those are what really gives meaning and purpose to the work that the students are doing. So today, what we want to think about is, in our small groups, is how can we design digital learning using these inquiry practices? So again, thinking about, it's hard to have inquiry in a, like, I would not typically teach like this, doing this as just me speaking to an audience. So how do we do this? How do we use these inquiry practices when we are not in a physical environment? How can we still use those essential questions and guiding questions and make sure that students are engaging in the material in an authentic way without having an in-person interaction? So as we move into the groups today, we'll be thinking about this. I'll pause there for a moment, Jeremy, and then I want to ask if there are any teachers involved or here with us today.
So I think that it's a good idea, if we don't mind, to go ahead and let us know if you're specifically an educator. Let us know that in the chat, but also either in the chat or by using that raise hand function. I'd like to go to one or two of you and kind of hear about an example or two of the ways that you might be thinking about instruction in this way. A lot of the folks here are not educators, or not traditional educators, so those examples are really helpful. I see that Jennifer Martin and Cassie Bird are both educators. Would either of you be interested and willing in letting us know the ways that you are using this type of instruction and thinking about your instruction?
Sure.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hey, Jeremy. Nice to see you again. So I kind of use, so I have pre-K through 12. I teach all levels. Mm-hmm. And Julie, I use a lot of these similar things. I would say a lot of times I mix those platforms, the guided learning based on the age, and the kids' experience, the students' experience, because it's not in, if they haven't done a explore on their own, coming up with their own, it's not intuitive because they've been taught more in a traditional setting for a long time. And even with that, I have always been an extra of the specials, you know, I hate that term, but the special class, the STEM educators, so they will be in that traditional setting and then they'll come to me and I've got to turn that mindset around sometimes. Although I do collaborate with other educators sometimes to get them to implement that as well. And I will be honest, Julie, I think that there is a need for all those types of education platforms. I think there is still time to get some content from an instructor, especially as they're younger. You know, they need to learn to read. So like, so it depends on the age. I absolutely adore open-ended learning with the students. It's like, that's why I'm a STEM educator, because the light bulbs, the kids, we're learning together. That's the most exciting part for me, is we're always learning together. They'll come up to me and excited about, okay, Mrs. Martin, I really learn about this. And we, like, you know, learn together numerous times, because there's no way I can know all the stuff. And I'm just asking them questions a lot of the times as they come up with these ideas. So it's an exciting way to learn. The kids are excited, but it is, and it's a special kind of educator, I believe. Not everybody can do it, especially if we classify it as a specials, because I teach so many grades with the different mindsets on how to manage those groups, work within those groups. It can be kind of crazy. I'm in some groups myself. As a matter of fact, this morning, an educator contacted me about she's doing it. She's new as a STEM educator, how to organize their year. And I've been doing it for a long time. So I usually, come up with a informal, this is our focus for when we start school. This is our focus here. And then go from there. I do like, has anybody here as educator used the, sorry, I'm tired, where they choose the Genius Hour. Genius Hour, that is really an open-end, very open-end platform. And I've used that numerous times. So it's,
yeah, Genius Hour is a great model of that would be very open inquiry.
Yeah. So
I was wondering, I noticed that Sarah Geithner is a high school science teacher. I was wondering, Sarah, have you been teaching virtually this spring? And would you be able to share some of your experiences and what that's been like?
Teaching, I don't know. We were, thrown into this. And I come from, our county is a very rural county, although the district that I teach in is considered a small city school. And luckily our school had a grant several years ago where we were one-to-one. So we were prepared in that our students actually had access to Chromebooks if they took them home with them. And, internet was another kind of issue that we tried to work out. And through surveys, most people had some sort of access. And so that was my struggle and why I wanted to be part of this group, because I guess we were kind of lost and we were trying to meet the needs of our students. And so we really pulled back on the content. New York State is also a high stakes testing state. So luckily, I was excited because kind of after a few weeks of being in quarantine, we had the Regents exams were canceled, which was really exciting to me. But then as I tried to push out some more, hands-on things for students to do, and it was just, I felt, I don't want to say pointless, but materials-wise, it was difficult. I teach chemistry. So trying to find things that kids would not blow up their house or, that they would have around the house and could really kind of play with those concepts we'd already learned was difficult. I found a few things online that I really liked and I'm excited to use next year. But yeah, I'm really hoping for some ideas of, I guess, maybe brainstorming at home inquiry things. Because next year I know that whatever our model is for school come the fall is going to be a larger push, and students are going to have to push harder and we're going to have to push them harder to be learners at home on their own.
All right, thank you for sharing. Yeah, Keisha?
Hi, I wanted to kind of respond to the two comments and just a quick idea that we can kind of use LabXchange to meet those needs. Number one, knowing that you can add your own content and also remix what's already on there, it would be cool to see if your kids are doing these hands-on experiments and they're recording themselves doing it, you can add those videos onto as an asset into a pathway. So then kids are kind of learning from one another. another, and then it's more engaging. And then I want to be the one to teach this particular concept or have it a part of this pathway. I think this platform lends itself to being able to do things like that. Additionally, there's a way for you to kind of add mentors on here so you can involve other people and kind of have that also be a creative way to get that engagement up. But I wanted you to consider there is a function to add your own materials, your own assets. And if those assets are coming from work products of kids or videos of your kids doing things, that would be an awesome way to reconnect them in a virtual sense while still learning some of the content, which we will get into later, but I wanted to put that out there just to respond to what you two are doing.
All right, so I think next we're going to go ahead and break into our smaller focus group so we can talk about how we can utilize inquiry, design process, design thinking within LabXchange and for the focus that we have. So I think Angie, do we know, did everyone sign, when you entered, you should have been asked a survey question on which group you wanted to join. So that's the group that Angie has. She's going to be putting you into those breakout groups right now, so you shouldn't have to do anything. If you've decided that you want to change your focus group though, put a message into the chat box right now and Angie will get you switched. So in just a minute, you'll be put into the group that you signed up for unless you put it in the chat box that you want to be switched. Anything to add, Angie?
Yeah, no, that's great. We're all set to go. So also if anyone ends up in a room and they want to switch, just let your group leader know and we'll just get you moved over. So, but we're good to go. Everyone's been assigned and unless I see some changes coming through actually.
And we'll come back for our group leaders, we'll come back at 10 till.
And one last thing, we are going to record each individual group. So should you stay in a group and maybe we couldn't switch you on time or something, we are trying to make even the small breakout groups available in video that you can watch later. So you'll have access to those afterwards as well.
Okay, so I think we're all getting back in now. We'd love to hear each group share out what they discussed. Keisha, do you want to share what your group talked about?
Sure. And actually, since I have Mary on here, I kind of look, because for some reason I am not finding where where the button is that you apply to add a mentor. Like I can't remember where I found that button, but we talked about mentorship and how to use mentors and collect mentors and add them to the platform for your students in your classes. And additionally, and a really important part of the conversation was, how do we understand the skills that students need to go out in our community workforces? What are those? And then how can we use the platform to kind of engage them in some of those skills? And I was telling my group that, especially if this is across industry, take a listening kind of approach and listen to each of those industries, and then pick like the 5 key things that you're seeing across those industries. Whether that's, we kind of said scientific misconduct was like something that was randomly brought up, but choose those keywords that you're finding are a need across industries, and those will be the keywords that you're kind of using as you're searching on LabXchange. Also remembering that you can remix assets. So if something's not there, or it's not specific enough to your kids or your community, you can add your own things or tailor that to your need. But Mary, can you please share your screen really, really quickly and just show us where we add or apply to be a mentor on the platform? Thank you so much.
It says my screen sharing is disabled. Someone wants to enable it for
Angie, can you
oh, there we go. Okay. So if you're in the library, when you search for someone, I'll just search. If I search for myself, it lets me edit it. If you choose the people one instead of the library, it shows you all the people who allow their profiles to be viewable. And then when you click on someone, usually you can read about them, and then at the bottom it'll say apply for mentorship. To be a mentor, you have to be accepted by them. So that basically opens like a communication chain, and then they can accept you or not as a mentor, as a mentee, and then you can have conversations that way as well. And then when you are looking in your own personal library, and sorry, on your dashboard, you can see if you have any mentees. Right now, I just have this one. So then they appear there, and that's where you can sort of archive your conversations. So library, and then this people version.
So, but can I, as a teacher,
Uh-huh.
add my own mentors from my own community to my classes?
You could add people to your classes. It wouldn't necessarily show up as a mentor. It would just show up as a member of your class.
Okay. And if I wanted to be open to being on that people list that you showed us, how do I become one of those people?
So if you click on your profile, here's where you have these options to include your profile in the search. And then down here it says, are you available to mentor?
Okay.
So if someone clicks mentor, they get this message from about me that what I'm basically mentoring them about.
Okay. So really what I'm hearing you say is we can, add people to our classes. We have the option of choosing if they're available as a mentor. And then from there, we can guide our students to applying to be their mentee.
Yep.
Okay.
That's the idea.
Okay. Maybe I was more on the right track than I thought. I probably was overthinking. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure. No worries.
What about the teacher, Mary, your group? What did you all discuss today?
Mainly we were looking at, since people are coming from very different places, ways you might use the platform to help provide background and use assets to remix to serve a variety of purposes. So a lot of people brought up the idea of like, if we're not in a synchronous situation, how might you provide a resource that's available asynchronously to support students, but also remixable to help meet them wherever their needs are.
Okay, great. And my group at the district level, we talked again about just what our needs are, and we really feel like there's a very big need to provide examples, exemplars, practices in digital learning, how we transform. What are some proven methods of transforming project-based learning and place-based learning and inquiry-based learning into this digital learning platform? So we said that we would try to continue to add some links to some of those practices from articles, resources that we can find, add those links into our discussion board in our course. And I'll work on moving some of those into our course content. So that course could then be shared with administrators, teachers who are looking for those examples of best practices. All right. Jeremy, have anything to add?
I don't. Other than I will say, and this shouldn't be a shock to this community, I don't think the conversations are really good. I think the ideas are very solid, and I'm kind of excited to see how these things move forward. And I want to make sure that everyone knows that Julie and Keisha and I are here, not just in these calls, but to help, and Mary too, to help answer questions throughout the week. If you start to dig in, which is our hope, is that you and your group start to dig in and try to actually start building the pathways that address the different challenges. I think that sometimes we get stuck in trying to design in our heads the perfect solution, and that slows us down, when in this particular case, these pathways and courses are so easy to change and edit that I think maybe the more valuable path is to just get in and get started. And some of those things won't be perfect, but put the things that are close and put some placeholders in, and then together we can find additional content and vet that content and get it to be at the level of quality that we're all expecting and wanting.
All right. All right. Thank you all for joining us today. And we'll be back again next Wednesday. So because we skipped last Wednesday, we're going to be going for two more Wednesdays, right?
Yes.
So we'll go into that first week of July. Hopefully you can continue to work with us on that. And we will be same time, 1 p.m. Eastern next Wednesday.
And we see you guys' questions still popping up in the chat. We'll try and get together and create some kind of response guide or something that you can kind of read after this. But great questions, and it's giving us a lot to think about. So keep asking, keep posting things in your classes, keep going, because this is good for everybody and allowing us to really prepare as we come upon the next school year in the next few months. So thank you, everybody.